And no, we are not live. I'm gonna video quality. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, we are live. All right, it is noon-ish. I think I'm 1 minute late. This is Coffee Break. Coffee Break with me, Neal McSpadden. So I'm founder, chief tax strategist at Tax Sherpa. And I do these live streams, every week just to kind of talk about different issues that come up. Could be news items. Big news yesterday was that trumpaccounts.gov is now live, the website. And I don't think there's been enough talked about Trump accounts. And part of that is probably just because they're called Trump accounts. In the original legislation, it was going to be called MAGA accounts. And somewhere in the back and forth on the one big beautiful bill, it changed into a Trump account. And that's the official designation. I'm 100% sure the next Democratic administration, whoever, whenever that might be, is going to change the name. So there'll be, I don't know, bright future accounts or something. But it was a code section created under a new code section created under Section 530A, and it's next door to Section 529, which is like the college saving type of plan accounts. And so these accounts are for anybody who is under 18. They can be opened by a parent or custodian, and they can be contributed up to $5,000 a year. So they are starting on it should be July 5th, but they might actually do it on July 4th of this year, because in the One Big Beautiful Bill legislation, the stated line is, a year and a day after the passage of the legislation. It was passed on July 4th, so it should be July 5th, but they might squeeze in an extra day there. So yeah, those are coming out, and the website is now live. So the way to open a Trump account is you have to file Form 4547 on with the IRS. They have to process it, which is a problem. And then you get an invite, and then you can create the account for your kid. Now there's a related strategy, which is a Section 128 plan, where employers can contribute up to $2,500 a year towards their employees' Trump accounts or their employees' dependents' Trump accounts. And it's a deduction for the company, and it is not income for the recipient, which is great. So you can kick in half basically as an employee benefit. And I think every company should do this, to be honest. So the way the Trump accounts are set up is you can put in up to $5,000 a year. You can at age 18, it turns into like a quasi IRA that can be used for special purposes. It can be used to fund college. It can be used to buy a first home. It can be used to buy a business. And that last one is really interesting. We'll see how that shakes out. But fundamentally, internal to the Trump account, it's low cost, broad index American mutual funds is kind of the thing. So we don't know exactly what the menu of offerings is going to be, but it's probably going to be S&P 500 type investments. So yeah, if you don't have one, or if you haven't set one up, then I would recommend checking it out. I think it'll be worth it for your kids' futures. Because, as many disagreements as I have with all things political, I do think the stock market will continue to go up, simply because of how the monetary system is structured. So, yeah, I mean, we'll get into this in the thing I wanted to talk about today. Since 1970, the average nominal return of the S&P 500, including dividend reinvestment, and in the IRA kind of structure, you have to reinvest because you can't take the money out, or you're severely penalized if you do, it's 10.9 to 11.2%, depending on exactly how you measure it. So that's high, right? And for a quasi-passive investment, I think it's hard to beat. So yeah, check them out. And then for newborns who are born between 2025 through 2028, the government's kicking in an extra $1,000 to as a part of a pilot program to kickstart the account. You have to opt into it though. It's a checkbox on the form 4547, and then supposedly Michael Dell contributed a bunch of money to add some additional funds to kids who are not the newborns and aren't getting the $1,000 bonus. So they'll get like 200, 250, something like that. Assuming everything works out. And so yeah, that was just news that I found this morning. So yeah, so on this coffee break, although I'm a tea guy, so here's my what is this called? Green tea, flowers, and red fruit from the Palace of Tea in Paris, which is I got it as a gift. It was really good. Um, but you can have your coffee. That's fine. I'm not going to criticize. I just had a bad experience with coffee as a child, and I never got over it. All right. So on to what I actually wanted to talk about. So let's get into that. And I mentioned this briefly last week. So last week I talked about the the AI audit wave that is coming, and that is true. So the question is, what do you do about it, right? And the answer is you have to have your own system built already, or by then, and you have to be able to use your AI to beat their AI is kind of what it comes down to. And so depending on what it is you're doing, that means different things. So let me share screen here. Share screen. This one. And yeah, okay, that looks like it's coming in. So the IRS is building an audit machine, an AI audit machine. Here's how to fight back. So again, I talked about this last week. I got a lot of responses about that. People were intrigued and concerned and interested by the points I was making, and I really do think this is coming. I think this is coming sooner rather than later. So, um, how do we fight back, right? And so, like it says here, last week I broke down the Aura stack, the AI pipeline the IRS is using to automate audits. Today, I'm going to show you, and I mentioned this briefly at the end last time, how my upgraded family management company strategy blocks every avenue of attack, and at the same time, it turns your teenager's TikTok habit into a $26,000 deduction. So let's get into some of the details here. All right. So the Aura stack is what's already live, things that are built, and things that are coming. And if you want to see more details, check out the recording from last week. And I went into more detail as how all this works. But basically, the IRS is working with Palantir. Palantir is, the AI company that has a lot of government contracts, a lot of weapons, and things like that. And they're also working with the IRS and have been since 2018. So they've built a bunch of stuff already. So layer one is the automated underreporter, and then this matches 2.8 billion information returns. So every person who gets a form that is filed with the IRS, like a W-2 or a 1099 or a K-1 or a 1098 or the list goes on. So those are matched against every filed tax return. And this generates 9 million CP2000 notices per year. Now, the 9 million does not mean 9 million individuals received notices. That includes like the repeats. So CP2000, any IRS notice you get that begins with the letter CP means computer processed. No human had a hand in generating that notice. But CP2000 is the notice that says, hey, you didn't include this, or your records don't match what we have, and explain. Now, the tricky thing about CP2000s is that, I wonder if I could just find a copy real quick. Let me see if I can do this. IRS CP2000 example. Let's see what we come up with here. I like to use perplexity a lot. It's a proposed adjustment letter. It's not a bill or an audit. Yes, that is true, but it doesn't look like that. Come on. Give me an actual link. Okay, I don't want to know how to respond. I just want to see. Okay. Let's see what this one says. Oh, taxaudit.com. That's a great domain for whoever owns that. Okay, so this is what they look like. It says notice CP 2000, tax year, notice date. Sometimes you'll get these from the future, which is fun. So like you'll receive it, like today's May 29th. You'll receive it, it'll say like June 3rd. And it's like, well, how's that? AUR control number. There's that automated underreporting system. And it'll say this. And, you can understand people's confusion because it says amount due, big number, bold, right there. And then it says summary of proposed changes, what you need to do immediately. And then if you don't agree, right down here in the small print, then, what to do. And the answer is to respond, right? In one way or another. And there's all these calculations as to what they think it is. And, the details about the sources and all that kind of stuff. And it's this long thing, and people get these letters and they're terrified, which is fair, actually. So people get those letters. It says amount due, and huge numbers of people just roll over and play dead. And that is, in my opinion, now this is speculation, but this is my opinion. I think that's by design. I think that they are intentionally sending out notices. Like if it's like, hey, we have this 1099 and you didn't have it in your thing, in your tax return, then okay, fine. Maybe they have it classified correct, maybe they don't, which is a separate issue. But you'll get stuff like, if you are a self-reporting Schedule C earner and you have children, and that Schedule C enables you to claim refundable tax credits like the earned income tax credit or the additional child tax credit, then you get letters, and those people tend to give up immediately. So whether it's the automated underreporter or other systems that send out notices, through these different layers on the AI technology stack, then I think it's by design that people will be overwhelmed, and the IRS is counting on that. So, so Palantir is continuing to build out the system. Layer 2 is the risk assessment scoring. It's machine learning models assigned risk scores to flagged returns, the dependent database, which was the first wave of AI, plus the systems research application, which is the second wave, plus Fair Isaac, which is the same as your FICO score, rank you from highest to lowest risk, and then they work from the highest. And by the way, the people who are the highest risk on the FICO side are the people who make the least money, typically, just as a broad generality. So, there's definitely a discrimination element to this whole model process. And then layer 3, which is the thing that's coming, is AI audit execution and escalation. So I went over all that last week. And, the question is, how soon is layer 3 coming? Now, given the speed of government implementation of these things over the last several years, I think we have 4 to 5 years until this is fully in operation and operating, nationwide. We'll see some pilots before then, but as far as the full development of the threat, I think we got that. So that's the state of the situation. That is the threat, and this is what we need to build our systems in expectation of. We need to get ahead of this now so that we have the things to respond once level 3 is in place. Okay. So yeah, the funnel of how AI processes every American. There's 2.8 billion information returns. 22.3 million discrepancies are flagged automatically. 9 million CP 2000 family notices, including the addition, every month you'll get another one, with additional interest and things like that. 2.9 million returns selected for compliance review. This is the pool from which audits emerge. It's not that all 2.9 million become audited, but that's the pool. And 35 to 42%, depending on which notice group you're looking at, get no response. And so silence leads to default assessment and legally binding debt. So in fiscal year 2009, I know that's kind of old at this point, but that's the latest number that we have. 18.4% of computer identified discrepancies closed without contacting the payer at all, zero human touch on either side. And so that was pre-AI, and now we are scaling that into the AI age. So the trap, after the threat is the trap, and the trap is this default assessment. So 42% correspondence audit closed with no taxpayer response. 18.4%, no human interaction either way, and there is a 90-day clock when you get those kind of notices. That's under section 6212. So basically, they sent out this proposal. It looks like a bill, even though it isn't. And if you don't respond within 90 days, then it becomes a bill for sure. So you got to make sure to respond. And so again, this goes back to my speculation. It's like, if you had this power and you knew that the government needed money, but needed is in quotes, you knew the government wanted money and it's your job to go after it, then there's a pretty strong temptation to send out notices, that a human being would never have spent the time on. But with AI, they don't have to. So that's the trap. I think more and more audits will come out, or more and more notices will come out, whether they're actual audits or not is, it's just details. But there is a limiter on the thing, and the limiter is the constitutional limit. So you have a right to due process, and I have a right to due process, and every American has a right to due process. And I won't even get into what rights actually are and how, well, my interpretation is different than most. But the constitutional limit is that, we found back in 2022, substantive human is required at formal adjudication. If you respond with documentation and formally contest, a human must enter the loop. The agency's human capacity is the binding constraint. This is the exploitable bottleneck. So AI sends out a notice, you send something back, AI assesses the notice and either kicks it up to the human or closes it. You want to be in the group that closes it. You can't stop the notice coming in the first place. And as that ramps up, there's going to be more and more of those. But you want to build your tax world in such a way that the response that you send in automatically closes the file. It never gets escalated to the human. So if you are a Schedule C filer, you are in the bullseye. And this is the majority of why I don't like filing Schedule Cs. 61% of the $696 billion tax gap, and tax gap refers to a report that the IRS publishes every so often, comes from pass-through and sole proprietors. The AI isn't coming for W-2 employees, largely because their reporting is external. So if you get a W-2 from a company, it's the company saying they paid you this, and you're reporting that on your tax return. The vast majority of the time that matches without any problem. And so there's just less audit surface there to audit. But for sole props, they are reporting their own income, especially if they have children and they're getting refundable tax credits. This has been a long-standing issue with IRS audits. The presumption is that your Schedule C is not correct. And so this is really why entity structure matters a lot. S corporations and partnerships file different tax returns. So an S corporation files an 1120S. Partnership files a 1065. The net amounts do flow through into your 1040. They are pass-throughs, but they don't get included in the full context of the 1040. And that separation of information is important when it comes to IRS evaluation and playing different departments against each other. Now, that difference is shrinking as AI gets more embedded into the system. So, that's going to be less effective over time. So, not only are those things more tax efficient, it's more audit defensive. But that edge is going to be shrinking. And but for entity reporting purposes, it pulls you out of the demographic. the agency's AI model flags the hardest. So you're kind of automatically routed into a lower risk grouping. And so if you remain in Schedule C, then you are likely to experience more of this rather than less. So there has always been a target on Schedule Cs, and to some degree, I kind of sympathize a little bit with the IRS because I have seen some people come in as clients and they bring in their old tax returns. And I'm looking at their Schedule Cs, and there are just crazy things on there, like did you drive 50,000 miles last year? You know, did, um, and all kinds of nonsense. Because fundamentally, um, if you're filing a Schedule C, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, you are doing a DIY tax return. And, people just by definition are not experts at the things they're not experts at. And so they end up with all kinds of errors in the accounting underlying the Schedule C and then the Schedule C itself. Okay, so how do we build our defensive system? So this is how we're going to build the defensive system for one particular strategy. It is the family management company. So the family management company is a great strategy for creating deductions at the operating company level and um, getting your kids valuable skills and saving for their retirement and now building it in such a way that it will um, it will you know be bulletproof effectively. Now, can you guarantee that? No, but it is as thorough a strategy plan as possible, knowing that this is the context in which we will be operating in the future. So, what is the family management company? Family management company typically is a spousal partnership LLC, which files Form 1065 that employs your children. It creates maximum informational distance between your operating entity and the child labor deduction. So you have an operating entity that is probably going to be an S corporation, which is already audit defensive. There's going to be another entity, a family management company that's an LLC partnership. Okay. This cannot work inside of the S Corp. It's got to be a 1065 because of the way Section 3121 works. And so the family management company needs to provide some kind of service for payment from the S Corporation. And so S Corporation pays the family management company pays the kids. If you set this up right, it is this wage is exempt from FICA. There's no Social Security, there's no Medicare tax. That's under Section 3121 for children who are directly employed by their parents, and a partnership owned by the spouses that are the parents of the child that still qualifies. Um, so it's got to either be a sole prop if you're a single parent, which is not my preferred situation, but if that's the reality, then that's the reality, or a spousal partnership. It cannot be owned by a corporation in order to qualify for the 3121 exemption. On top of that, you can't do strategies just for show. You got to actually do the thing, and that's where a lot of people fall down. But we are fixing that with automation and AI with this. So every company needs a profit motive. So effectively, in this scenario, for teenagers who are on TikTok and whatever, we're going to turn them into social media creative strategists. And depending on where you live, the market rate varies, but nationwide, that ranges for between $25 and $50 an hour as far as like if you were to hire one. So we can benchmark their rates and do a whole bunch of behind the scenes um, uh, assessment to make sure that the amount there is defensible, right? So that's part number one. Also, under alternative section, there is no FUTA, no federal unemployment tax. And in most states, not all, but most, there's no SUTA either. And so the profit motive of the family management company is to, like any agency, you charge a client and then you pay your fulfillment and you make a spread, and that's it. So the family management company will be profitable because it's charging, above its cost for the services to the S Corp. So S Corp gets a tax deduction for the expense, just like any other marketing expense or contractor expense you would get, and pays here. And there is revenue to family management company. Family management company pays the teenager. And then children must perform actual age-appropriate documented service at market rate compensation. So we'll get into what that really means here on the next slide. So this is the matrix. The FMC is not just a tax play; it's an anti-audit architecture designed to block every vector of aura stack use. The aura stack uses to select, score, and assess. So AUR flags Schedule Cs, sole props, 55% misreporting, as a general Schedule C rate. So our defense is we file a Form 1065. Now, the the historical audit rate for partnerships that have over $10 million of assets is less than 0.1%. Now, we don't have statistics on audit rates for partnerships under 10 million, but it's got to be less. And that's compared to 2% for Schedule C. So it's like 20 times ish um, in terms of the difference in audit risk based on historical statistics. Even though, my whole point here is that the historical statistics are going to change, but we are prepared for that with this whole stack. So um, another risk flag is wage amounts that look unreasonable for a minor. And, the thing to all of this, let me go back for a second. The thing to all of it is, uh, I guess it's here, is that the default assessment by silence, yes, but also the people who do respond often lose because of documentation. I say it all the time. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Uh, the vast majority of things that the IRS gets people on for, judgments and things is documentation. So if the IRS were to come in and say, hey, how did you decide that your kid is making $25 an hour and you have nothing, then that's a problem, right? Now, we set it up as a 1065 so they ask less in the first place, but of the ones that do ask, we got to have something. So we run reasonable compensation analysis. You can look on Glassdoor, you can look on salary.com, and you can find the benchmark rates for social media coordinators in your area, and then you archive this information in your evidence locker. The AI questions whether services were actually performed. No contemporaneous records. Contemporaneous is a big word. It means, did you take records at the time instead of trying to come up with a record later? No proof of output. So the way we build this is we build it inside of a website automation tool called Go High Level or High Level. And the way we set this up, there's going to be automated timestamped SMS logs between the system and the employee, which is, automatic logs of daily task assignments, screen time apportionment, and then proof of output file uploads. Another attack surface is Section 183 hobby loss. This is the thing that a lot of people get worried about. And this is where if you lose money in at least 3 out of the last 5 years, the IRS could come in and they could ask whether this is a business or a hobby, right? Because hobbies are, if you make gains, are taxable, but if you make losses, are not deductible. Businesses, if you make gains, are taxable. If you make losses, are deductible. That's a key difference. So hobby losses come in a lot with fun stuff, like if you have horses or boats or farms or things like that. So if you lose money in 2 out of 5 years, the burden of proof is on the IRS, and they have to prove that you're not a business. But if it's losing money in 3 out of 5 years, then the shift in burden shifts to the taxpayer. You have to prove that you are a business and not a hobby, which is, again, comes down to documentation. Are you doing the things that um, that businesses do? Do you have a separate entity? Do you have separate bank accounts? Are you advertising? Are you trying to do the things in order to try to make money? Because I've talked about this before, but the entire tax code rests on the fact that the government is trying to incentivize behavior, and they're doing it with carrots and sticks, right? So the carrot is that if you are trying to improve the economy and thus improve the country, then you get all these tax breaks. You can deduct things that you can't deduct as an individual person running a hobby. And so, so the The check for that is this hobby loss rule, right? So the IRS could come in and say, are you running a real business? And so the way we set up the family management company is to make profit. There is a built-in profit motive, and it's going to earn a standard spread on fulfillment services, kind of typical across the board that you'll see in any kind of agency fulfillment. And so the profit motive is inherent to the structure rather than manufactured. And then there's a 9-factor test that I'm not going to get into, but that test is satisfied. The default assessment risk. So that's the giant trap, right? So people get a notice, there's no response, and then those proposed amounts become locked in, and plus interest that is accrued during that 90 days anyway. So with all of the above, we form an AI substantiation layer automatically that can auto generate a response packet. So imagine this: imagine you get one of these letters and they say, submit us explanation of the, wages or whatever. And you get this letter, you take a picture of it with your phone, you send it to your AI system, it compiles a response in 30 seconds, you send it back, and then everything's done. So that's the future we're trying to build here. And so your AI fights with their AI before a human opens your file at the IRS. And that's either going to force escalation, and the human will get that and say, oh, this is all looks good, so case closed. Or we just by the agency capacity constraint, they don't have the time to look at high quality files, and so it just gets automatically closed, right? And then Palantir is building this Snap cross-reference system for platform data like PayPal and Venmo, Etsy, and all that kind of stuff. And then we build the record keeping to automatically track everything through the bank accounts, so there's a clean accounting report. Everything matches between the bank account and the books and the tax returns. There's no leaks for anything. There's no discrepancies to flag. So this is the stack that we're building to basically you're operating under the assumption that you're always under audit is kind of how it works out. And we're building tools to build responses to that always under audit perspective that run automatically, right? Because the problem with all this stuff is like, this is all stuff you should be doing anyway, right? That's what the IRS will say, but it's hard. It takes time. All of this administrative burden has just taken so much time that people, get sloppy, and, I understand it happens. But that's the weakness, right? So if we build the AI system to prevent that weakness from being exposed in the first place, then we have something to fight fire with fire. So that is that is the countermeasure, right? So you're weaponizing the same kind of systems on your behalf, but you gotta build the system. That's the whole thing. So the way this would work in a family management company structure is we have this AI powered compliance, right? So, um, you know, the software system would send a text to the teenager after school saying, "Hey, go research 3 HVAC TikTok accounts, screenshot them, screenshot the ads, send the hooks, and save to your folder." Right. So that's giving it direction for the day, which is an important managerial control element, and in terms of employment. Now every smartphone tracks app usage, right? So we'll build automations on the phone level saying, trying to figure out the app usage of TikTok or Instagram or whatever social accounts are being used, and we'll update the system daily with that, and the system will text the kid, say, okay, you used TikTok for 120 minutes today. Reply with the percentage that was business research. It can be 30% or whatever, and then the system will calculate billable minutes automatically, right? So let's say it was 120 minutes and 30%. That creates 36 billable minutes and goes into the log, which will then inform the payroll cycle, that is paid later. And then the Friday proof of output, it would be basically the SMS would trigger file uploads from CapCut or Canva or content calendars, competitor analysis screenshot, basically building the archive like, this is what was done this week. This is our proof that work was done, and it's done like in real time, so that the archive is just constantly there. And then every 60 days, we archive the whole thing because things do get deleted, for space saving purposes if you leave them there. And so basically, just create a workflow that automatically exports all of that, and you back it up to your drive or your cloud or whatever. And so, it is just constantly in the loop. And it's not just going to be do research. There's going to be other tasks. There's going to be, okay, based on that research, let's create new social posts based on these themes, or create a reel video using b stock footage, or b-roll stock footage. And so this is going to be real work, providing real value to the operating company depending on what that operating company does. So this is, basically, it's like the most legitimate thing that can be done because it is providing real value. So when the IRS AI sends a query, your AI sends back timestamped logs, appointment records, proof of output files, salary benchmarks automatically. The constitutional bottleneck that requires that human in the loop means that if your substantiation is clean, now this is my speculation, just be fair. So my speculation is that if your response has clean substantiation, then their system will accept it without human escalation. So that part is the speculation. The rest of this is stuff that is happening. Okay, so how did we get to $26,000? Well, in 2026, the standard deduction is $16,100, meaning you could pay anybody $16,100 and they would pay zero federal income tax. Now, some states follow that, some states have their own adjustments, so we're just talking federal here. On top of that, anybody can contribute to a traditional IRA, provided they have earned income. A W-2 is earned income, so you could add $7,500 to the $16,100, and then the person, the recipient of that, which in this case is the teenager, puts $7,500 into a traditional IRA, and that becomes a subtraction. And now our taxable income, or our adjusted gross income, is back under 16,100. And then we have this is new for 2026, an employee funded tax, a Trump account contribution plan. And this is the $2,500 employer contribution towards employees' Trump accounts or employees' dependents' Trump accounts. So this is deductible to the business. It is not income to the recipient. So the sum of those three things adds up to $26,100. And so depending on what bracket your S corporation income would have generated in the first place, plus, whatever W-2 income you would have had to take to have your own reasonable compensation from the S corp, that could be 10 grand a kid, basically. And so it is, and then how do we get to $26,100? We provide high value work. That's what it comes down to. And the social media content strategist, if you went out and hired that, is expensive. Go ahead and go look. It's a lot of money, especially if you're hiring an agency to do it for you, and or if you hire direct. It's expensive to get talent who can actually do that. But the thing I like about most about the family management company is not even the tax deductions. It's actually the way to set your kid up for life. So let's look at the generational wealth play. So let's say you hire a kid at 13 and they work from 13 to 17, and you do these two things. You do the traditional IRA and you do the Trump account contribution. What does that turn into if they can leave it alone? So the biggest weakness of all retirement accounts is leaving the money alone, because people don't. And I've got a whole rant about retirement accounts because of that feature. But if we model the historical average since 1970, and 1970 is picked because of the changes in ERISA accounts that created passive income flows and all kinds of stuff. We end up with $50,000 worth of contributions over 5 years, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, it's 5 years, and $10,000 a year. Now the amounts are going to adjust a little bit every year because there's always inflation adjustments to brackets and to contribution limits and these kind of things. But we're just going with 2026 numbers. So $50,000 of contributions. By age 17, there'll be a little bit of growth. It'll grow to 62. By age 30, it should be 240,000 ish. Obviously there should be up and downs, but on average. By age 45, it's over $1 million, and by age 65, it's almost $9 million between the two. It'd be about 6 point something in the IRA, and then another bunch in the Trump account. So, you know, that is a huge asset that you're setting up for your kids virtually tax free. Now, why do I say virtually tax free? So we go back here. The marginal rate savings, including the self employment tax that you're saving, is going to be roughly $10,000, and it's going to range a little bit, but, somewhere in there. And that is going to fund this $10,000. So effectively, the government is financing the retirement account contributions that grow into $9 million at the end of the child's working life. And, assuming all financial projections, disclaimers go there, right? But, based on the past 50 years of history, that has been the case. And um, I think the stock market will continue to be the place to deploy capital for relatively low work. I mean, passive income doesn't truly exist, but it's as passive as you're going to get, basically. So you get to do that, and then you say, "Okay, Neil, that sounds good. I'm funding my kids with 10 grand, and the IRS is funding it, but I don't want to give my kids 16 grand." And here's my counter to that. This goes into an UTMA or similar kind of bank account, and the fundamental reality is that you're already paying for your kids anyway. So now you just spend money out of their account. They want to go to a camp. So right now summer's starting. My kids are going to camp, and it's expensive. So there's camp, and there's swim team, and there's this class, that class. I want new shoes. I want a bike. I want a car. All this stuff costs giant amounts of money. So those are not deductible. But if you're spending the kids' money, the deduction you got was for the job that they provided, and so in net effect, they kind of become deductible. Could you pay for a child's private school out of their own money? Yeah, you're the custodian of the account. Could you buy they want to buy a car or whatever? Can you spend it on there? Yeah, because it's not a business deduction, but the fact that they created the money in a business deductible way is perfectly fine, right? So what you do with the money after that is totally up to you. And then provided that the amounts are less than 16,000, then that's all fine. There are some nuances with that that I'm not going to get into here, but that is things to consider. And you know, the way we're going to offer this is either done for you, setting up the whole fortress, setting up the website, setting up the automations and all that kind of stuff, setting up the payroll, doing the initial interview of figuring out what they will be doing based on the operating business. That's going to be this one. And then once we figure all that out, because this is still in development, we're going to offer the do-it-yourself version if you just want all of the documentation essentially, and you want to implement it yourself. So those are going to be the two offers. But yeah, so bottom line, the machine is built and is being built more. The clock is running. So Aura is live. The layer 3 is still being built, but layers 1 and 2 are existing right now. And so the important thing to do is to fight AI with AI and utilize all of the available resources and strategies and tactical and strategic considerations to maximize your deductions. So, if your teenager spent 3 hours on TikTok today, was it a waste of time? Or was it a $26,000 deduction backed by an AI audit shield? So, that's what we're building. And this is going to apply to all kinds of small business owners. And yeah, that's the upshot. So, that's what I had for you today, and I didn't drink any of my tea. It's kind of lukewarm now. So it is time to wrap this up, and we will go back to. Why am I only half the screen? Let's see. Layout. There we go. So that's the kind of stuff that we're building. And I was talking to the team internally this morning. My tax Sherpa team, we have a daily stand up where we go over, you know, all kinds of issues. And the the thing is, we have to, in software, you refactor when new things come in and like you want to change the code or you want to add things. It's processes refactoring, and we have to refactor our architecture around tax strategy. So mostly, not all, but mostly the code has not changed in terms of the internal revenue code, but the way in which risks and tools and resources are available is changing. And so we have to go in and build the infrastructure so that all of the tax strategies are AI supported and bulletproof, with the understanding that more audits are coming with as the Aura system stack continues to develop. So that is the upshot, and we are actively doing that in Tax Sherpa. So, I've hired two guys in the last couple weeks. One in doing, just expert tax review, and so that, and my other is a developer. And so, between the two of them, that's leaving me with the freedom, not freedom, but the opportunity to, spend more time focusing at this layer so that we can build the next generation of tax strategy that will, be 100% compliant, be 100% documented automatically, with this AI archiving approach, so that when the IRS asks questions in the future, and they're going to be asking more questions in the future because of the AI system, we automatically have everything ready to go. And it should literally be a 30-second thing that we can generate all of the responses and all the substantiation. And so we can just build that package, send it back to the IRS and say, go pound sand. We're right. All right. That's it for this coffee break because, like I said, my tea is getting cold, and we'll do it all again next week. So last week I had wanted to do the topic of, you started a new HVAC company. We do a lot of HVAC work, and what is that? What are your first like 5 steps? And I still haven't gotten to that. 'Cause I had that realization last week, and that prompted this week's coverage of the new family management company strategy. But we will get there. Maybe I'll get to that next week. Otherwise, stay tuned every week, noon Eastern on Fridays. I'll update you with the news. I'll update you with strategy, um, you know, and forward-thinking pieces like the one we just did. So, see you guys next week.